Welcome to this week's edition of the Museum Roadshow. This week we're 12 miles north of Lake Park doing a little story about a town that was, the Town of Voss. It's right off of County Highway 7 on 340th Street. About the only thing that's left of it that you can see is the foundation of the creamery, but if you don't know where to look, you'll miss that too. And we're thankful to the people of this community that have given us some really good pictures to scan in to make this an interesting show.
Voss is a name I think that came from Norway, because there's a town by the name of Voss in Norway that I went through about 2 years ago. I and the wife took a trip to Norway. It started in about 1880, the way I understand it. I think they built it because they thought the railroad was going to come through here from Lake Park north, but it never did come here. They built it through on Highway 32 instead. But everybody had livestock in those days, and they started with a creamery over there. They called it the Atlanta Walworth Cheese and Butter Factory. And they had a good flowing well there on the north side of the road. And they started that creamery way back then because people would haul their milk. I guess they took the milk to Voss rather than cream. And they made cheese and butter there. And at those days, there was a town about every 6 miles. That's about as far as people could go with their horses to travel for supplies and things. So it was there for a number of years. I think it finally died in the 20s. They had a store and a feed mill, a restaurant, and a big community hall there. I think that was built a little later. The creamery was there for quite a number of years, the way I understand it, and made a lot of butter and cheese. Then, when they finally closed the creamery, about World War I time, they made it into a blacksmith shop for a few years.
I'll finish a little more from what Justin had on there. He mentioned the creamery, and my uncle took that over after it quit. According to the records, it quit in 1915. And my uncle took it over and run it as a blacksmith shop. And there's, in the pictures that you have, there's a house right across the road, and his oldest son was born in that house in 1919. The town of Voss was mainly on the south side of the road, and the creamery was on the north side of the road, and the town was in Atlanta Township, and the creamery was in Walworth Township. And I imagine, being the flowing well was there, that was a cooling system for the milk and the cream, so they could keep it cool. And I'm also pretty sure they must have had a small steam engine in that creamery building in order to turn the churn, and because my uncle had what they call a line shaft for the blacksmith shop, and I think that was probably already in that building when he moved into it. How long he stayed as a blacksmith there, I don't know, but I know by about 1921 or so he had moved.
The first settlers in this area were all Norwegians, I think, just about all totally Norwegians from this area. And then when the Czechoslovakian people started moving in later on, and a few Germans, Knufs of Germans, I think, then they built that community hall, and the Czechoslovakian people were the ones that were in kind of charge of that. It was a lodge and a fraternal organization and they had a lot of community things, dances there and things like that.
The dance hall is what I remember the most, because I used to go along sometimes to the dances there, and when my dad copped there, and they always had to have cops for when they held dances. I can remember when they had a good crowd in there with a lot of good music, and that the dance floor would just about bounce up and down. You could just about hear the floor move. My one uncle that I talked about that run the blacksmith shop, he later moved closer towards Ulen, and he got to be a moonshiner. And he didn't always have money enough to do this, so there was an old doctor in Ulen that come out there and decided to furnish the sugar and the stuff to make the moonshine with. And so his name was Doc Botany, and he used to make, my Uncle Gus made the moonshine, and then Doc Botany would come and get it, and then he'd take it into his doctor's office, and he'd write prescriptions for it. And I'm sure some of them filled prescriptions wound up at the Voss Hall dance hall. And Bruce Tingen was just telling the story about that his folks had went to a dance there and with their own Model T, and somewhere or another the windshield got stolen off the Model T while they were dancing, and I almost have an idea who stole that windshield.
When I was growing up, all there was left was the community hall. But there were about 3 farms right around there. The Morgan farm on the north side of the road. There was another disabled World War I veteran by the name of Ed Bly that lived on the east side there, a little farm, and then there was a house in the barn west of the hall there. The hall was there until about 1970, I think. It wasn't being used much anymore, and the Czechoslovakian people were getting scattered all over, I guess. In fact, they were getting intermarried with all the Norwegians around here, I think, so there weren't many true Bohemians left.
At one time, it was the telephone exchange between Lake Park and Ulen in the early days, and I don't know when they first put the line in, but I have a picture home of some road grading north of Lake Park that the telephone line was already up at that time in 1906. But they'd have to ring into Voss then, and then Voss would ring into Ulen to pick up so they could get phone conversations back and forth.
It served the people around here for quite a number of years, and then they also had a band, community band, and a ball team. My dad and his brothers and uncles and a lot of other neighbors around here played in the band and played ball. The band played, my dad said, from 1910 till about 1922 is when the band was going here, and they played on 4th of July celebrations. They had a big parade in Hawley, and I guess one in Lake Park after World War I. Soldiers came home that they played and paraded. The ball team, I understand, played teams from White Earth and Ogama and Lake Park and Ulen. And it was kind of the center of the community there. There was a lot of activity going on for a number of years until cars came into play, and then people traveled farther.
Well, this concludes our brief history of the town that was, the town of Voss.